Okay, I'm colleague with Lotzi and Steffi, working in the Romanian Institute of National Minorities. I'm not a Romani scholar myself, I'm a scholar of migration studies. And I was studying migration from Romania for different groups in the past 10, 15 years. And in the past 3-4 years, I had a project in comparing Romanian and Roma migration, and especially effects of migration for the Roma. And I was struck by, I was wondering what goes on in Roma ghettos, in settlements. I'm not speaking about the whole Romani population, it's quite a variety. I'm not interested in it. I'm interested in what happens with the poorest of Europe when they are able to move freely. And this came as a kind of question. I was a colleague of mine in the Bacău region, and he saw a former ghetto, a settlement, a very poor settlement. He said, I couldn't recognize the orbit. What happened? And migration happened. And migration happened all over Romania, of course. And in the past 7 to 8 years, the poorest of Romanian citizens were able to travel to Europe. And I'm inquiring what is going on. And I try to portray the relationship between inequality, remittances, migration in a broader debate that is currently going on. I mean, we talk about huge wave of remittances worldwide, effects of remittances. And we know that there are a lot of changes going on due to financial and social remittances. And there is a huge literature on financial remittances, less on social remittances, but still very interesting. And we know that there are changes. Now, in the migration scholarship, there is a kind of leveled understanding of migration, i.e., those having more money first move out, and then this creates kind of looping effects, making others to move out. So there is an understanding that migration encompasses entire communities of origin. So effects, i.e., money goes in everything. What I was struck by was to find out that Roma were actually outside of Romanian networks. So it's a kind of segmented migration going on, and the effects are quite different. Also talking about remittances, there is a clear understanding that remittances decrease poverty, but at the same time, relations between poverty and inequality are mixed, right? So in some cases, inequality may decrease, in some other may increase. And we all know that Roma migration was a very problematic issue in the past years. At least that was regarded as a very problematic issue. And I'll talk a bit about research. A lot of research was done in countries of destination in the Western Europe. Not sufficiently, because you really need time to spend when researching these people, but less is in country of origin. And if you want to have a transnational lens of this migration to understand how these people really fare and what are their stakes and attitudes, then I think we have to both encompass. And in the last days, there were some papers with people having multi-sited ethnography, so encompassing both contexts. And I think this is fundamental. In terms of, I'll also have in the presentation afterwards, but I think I also can address it here. I found two very nice papers on the Roma migration that can enlighten us a little bit of what goes on. One is Mia Pantea, where she compares traditional, more cohesive Roma groups and less cohesive, more assimilated Roma groups. And Mia's claim is that basically those who were more cohesive, able to capitalize more on their social capital, social ties, were more able to migrate than the others, right? So social capital, it's a very important element in understanding migration, as Thomas Fay said, the crucial meso level. And the second nice paper, it's on Ionela Vlase, where she distinguishes between different categories of Roma and the structures of opportunities within which the Roma migrants are able to move on. Okay, what I did fieldwork in two villages, in two places in Romania. One, it was a village I did research 15 years ago, and then I did another one research in 2012-13. It's a Hungarian majority with a Roma minority. And the second one is a very special place for Romania. It's a city of Sebeș, which has the highest FDI per capita in the country, i.e. about 2.5 billion euros invested in a very small city of 25,000 people. Surprisingly for me at the first sight, it has a very large Roma settlement of 4,000 people, largely unemployed or employed in very poor conditions. So in a place that was able to remake its hinterland, was able to remake commuting, has a lot of job offers, Roma still were outside of the society. And as again in Sebeș it's nice because we have also the Mercedes factory, the new one. There are two very large Austrian investments in wood industry. And there is also a very vivid local entrepreneurship. I mean, people there were very much trading during state socialism and were having this, there were some cooperatives. And they are, even today, they were very active. And during the field work we did field work in 3 years with a group of people. And actually every year they were appearing new factories there. So people were quite able to develop their businesses. What I saw in this, and I'll talk about something that was important here. In both places, migration of Roma was very diversified. And it was a bit striking for me because when we look at the Romanian migration, at least after 2000, we had two clear destinations, Italy and Spain, where people used extensively social networks. Now, what I found in Zabala was different. It was a small group of Roma who were able to specialize in trading and became informal traders in the Central Eastern Europe, and some other Roma who were only randomly working in Hungary and coming back. But those in Sebeș were having, I see a bit more mobility than migration. They were using different mobility patterns to different West European countries. A lot of them performing street work, so something very marginal, limited in time, 2-3 months, coming back, staying, and then going away. And also what I found in Sebeș, and that's striking for me, was a very small use of social capital. People didn't help each other. I saw families, one of the daughters, for instance, was going to Germany, but the others weren't, right? So, and she could get a stable, regular job. She could help the others, but that was not the case. So somehow, the more information of what people can do was useful for these people. So they knew that in Paris, if you go, you have to go to the center where you can get some support. But then a lot of them are reluctant to rely on social ties, right? At the same time, though, after 2007-8, they encountered the European crisis. So there was not the same context as in Italy and Spain, where thousands of workers were taken on job overnight. So in Italy, it was sufficient to go to Milano Centrale, for instance, to the station, in 2-3 days you could get something, right? So the whole labor market was different. And then the question is, and this will come later on, what was interesting for me was to observe that those who were able to stay more, to incorporate more on the Western labor markets, were able to do a little bit more. This was not just for the Roma, this was also for Romanians and Germans. So those people able to stay, let's say, 10-15 years abroad, able to capitalize not just financial sources, but also information and know-how, were able to do much more to develop their own businesses. And this applies also for the Roma, when we'll talk about right now about the ways in which actually inequality changes. And what I see in terms of, I rely on these two cases, but I also try to go through other cases that were discussed in Romania in the past years. There are some patterns of change when we talk about segregation and the situation of those ghettos. There are those challenging inequality. So the Roma are able to come up with funds to build up houses, to show the others that they are not as they consider to be, and usually occupy center stages. This happened, for instance, in the case of Zabala. There are those exiting, i.e. leaving completely the ghetto. We don't want to have anything to do again with Romania and this place, deciding to stay abroad. And that's complying to the same situation. So they can do nothing. Basically, they have to stay in the ghetto. Although migration may somehow improve their living conditions, they are still gypsies. You are Tsigan. And those able to cross ethnic boundaries and going into, for instance, inter-ethnic marriages. This happened in a field work in Transylvania, and the research was done by Câmpanu. And I'll talk a little bit about that, because I think these four patterns, from what I understood from the fieldwork, I don't claim generalization, but basically and to encompass all patterns existing, but I think these are 4 major mechanisms of change going on, and these mechanisms can be found in one specific place or in different places, right? So it's not the Roma from Sebeș, all of them are challenging. No, it's not the same, it's a mixture. So what I found is that the consumption patterns change for those challenging, so they are able to consume much more. They construct houses in, for instance, research on Troc, gypsy palaces. I mean, it's not necessarily something challenging, but the others, the Romanians, look what these gypsies are doing, right? But if you are going to the northern part of the country, quite similar palaces are done by Romanians, right? So in the Oaș country, in the Maramureș, in Bukovina, are huge houses. And if I show you pictures, well, it's a question of style, but they don't really differ that much, right? And those challenging are usually, it's accommodated by separation from the ghetto, so they skip the ghetto. When I'll talk, at the end, I'll talk a little bit about challenging attitudes, because this happens, and it's much more interesting for me. In some cases, challenging, it may be related to clear jobs abroad. For instance, there was a guy who worked in Spain, had a wonderful job. He sold sandwiches, but he was able to do quite a lot of money out of it. And coming back to Romania, he first of all adapted, but at the same time, he was always challenging the ways in which the Roma are treated. The same happened with a guy who's an entrepreneur now, migrated to Germany, working construction in Germany, was able to open up a small construction company in Romania, and he became a local political MP. And basically, he was challenging the Romanians, and he was able to do something for the ghetto. So these people are actively pursuing the change of the segregation and the change of attitudes, but this is very rarely. I would say something else. In Sebeș, we've been struck by the radicality of the anti-gypsism, right? So the Romanians there, it's quite a lot of variety in the country, so we don't have to say that all Romanians are that, but in Sebeș particularly, people were really considering the gypsies as a subhuman species, right? So this subhuman species, they are not like us, although some of them were much smarter, for instance, right? So this didn't matter. Right, but at the same time, for instance, challenging in Zabala meant that some Roma who became traders were able in the 90s to construct houses, and they borrowed the Hungarian symbols, and all the Hungarians say that the world turned upside down, right? The social order, for instance, where Hungarians were in the center, Romanians were on the hill, and gypsies somewhere not visible, turned upside down because those gypsies came in the center. And actually it was quite, when I did the first field work, it was quite, people were quite vocal about that. I mean, and the ways in which they described the situation of the gypsies before and afterwards was like a novel, you know. So somebody who first eats, let's say, dead poultry, and afterwards is able to show us everything. But at the same time, in some cases, this challenging attitude, there's a new category of Roma emerging. People recognize that they changed, right? So they went to West, they started, there is something going on there. The second one, exit. This I found in Sebeș. It's not just, it's exiting a situation of strain, right? So it's not just poverty is there always, and it's striking. We've been talking about why the Roma migrate so much. I would say why the Roma migrate so few, because if you are looking in terms of comparative data, in 2010, Roma migration actually started later than the Romanian migration for various reasons. And in 2010, it was one in the 90s at the beginning, but very small, going to Germany and then they sent back. But as a large migration, large migratory wave, it went on after 2007-8, basically. And in 2010, there was a national inquiry done by the Împreună agency where they were saying Roma migrated as much as Romanians. But at that time, already Romanians migrated quite a lot, right? So in absolute numbers, they may be very possible. This is a research hypothesis. They actually migrated less than Romanians, right? But what I saw here, in terms of exiting, so people want to get outside of a situation of strain. It's very nice, the one guy, Anghel, and he said, I want to get out of here. People here are bad. And Spain is so wonderful. He got a job. He was working in a small restaurant, and he got the support and trust of the employer. And he say, I cannot recognize myself. I don't have anything here to keep me tied to the place, right? So it's on the one hand, and right now we might also go to what was specific to the Roma. I mean, these people are living in very poor condition and very much discriminated against. And sometimes in some settlements, mistrust, it's very powerful, right? So they didn't trust each other. So the life of these people, it's on the one hand conditioned by the lack of financial resources, but at the same time it may be also very much shaped by the lack of trust within the settlement. I wouldn't say a community, in the settlement. The compliance. So a lot of migration I saw, a lot of migration I saw, it was a temporary migration. People were unable to adapt to the Western societies. I mean, you need a bit more. You need a stable job, first of all, right? And the stable jobs nowadays in very many Western European countries, it's something a bit more rare to be found. But basically, what they did is that they improved their consumption. They started to invest a little bit in their houses. The condition of the ghetto is changing. And then I'll go to crossing and then to the final thing. And basically, they are also remaining as gypsies in the gypsy quarter. The crossing any boundary is a part, as I said, a more complex process of Romanianization going on in many places. And in the context of migration, a lot of villages are emptied of population, and then the Roma are getting into the center of villages, or they're starting to mixing with Romanians. This was a research done by Campano in a former Saxon village where Roma started to mingle with Romanians. Okay, and I try to put it, this is a final. I try to understand what goes on and how can we explain these patterns. And what I found striking, it was that migratory career influenced the ways in which afterwards people were able to reposition themselves, right? So those going abroad for a very short time, they weren't able to change much, right? Because first of all, they needed much more resources and also the contact with the West. As exit, it was very much linked to social ties with locals in the West. And what is interesting here, not only for exiteers, but also for all the others, they experience they express the experience of being treated as a human being, right? So yesterday we saw the example from Spain. Well, I mean, people coming from Spain, even from begging, were saying that we've been treated much better than here. Or people coming from Greece back home to Romania, right? So they had marginal jobs. A lot of them are begging, okay. A lot of them are working. It's very much mixed. It's very hard to generalize. I wouldn't go into it too much. But basically, everybody said they were considered as a human being, treated with respect. So this claim for respect, I think, and it is fundamental here, and I relate it with what the whole literature on migration says, that migrants experience a sort of emancipation going on. Romanian women going to Italy working as a badante middle-class family coming back, they experience an emancipation from the gender relations back home in Romania. And in the case of the Roma, I analyze here, especially in Sebeș, a lot of them complained about the ways in which they are treated by people and, interestingly, by institutions. If you go to the medical doctor there, you are treated as a human being, and they experience not very nice events in Romanian institutions, right? This comes as a conclusion. Still, it's interesting that everybody who was able to move away was able to somehow to invest in something. And I will say something about the future. If this will change the situation on the local labor market, I don't really know. It's not about the Roma not willing to work or not being trusted, or all of them. Of course, there are people, they're also, let's say, nice and good people. I mean, people you can rely on, able to work, willing to work, doing, some others not. But basically, it's the unwillingness of the employers to employ them. And I had an example of a woman. I always give it because it's striking. She was trying to find work for 5 years, leaving CVs to all these plants in Sebeș. And again, I mean, they need workers, all of them. And once she was getting outside of the factory, and she was simply saying, "Oh, the hell, they're not serious." And there was a woman outside, and she said, "What is going on? They're not serious. They say they want to employ people, and they don't want to employ. They don't want to employ them. And do you want to work?" I mean, the woman was the owner of the factory, right? And she said yes. And after 3 months, that person was actually one of the main pillars of the factory. So he was the last worker after which the products were getting to the customers. And this kind of attitude was described to me also by people who were, let's say, experienced worker in some other factories. When they tried to bring some relatives and friends, everybody was reluctant, right? So somehow the existence of and staying in the ghetto, in the Țigănie, put a kind of stamp on them. This is much more important than, let's say, the economic interest. Okay, now I think, yeah, right now I'm developing this kind of 4 categories, and I'll write something about it. And there's a picture from the ghetto. It's not that bad as it, because people invested a lot, and in comparison to other Roma settlements, looks much better. So, yeah, but yeah, this is it. Thank you very much.